Where do I start? Where do I begin? How do I start?
My biggest fear going to Liberia was knowing all this stuff about the challenges people face in their context. What do I have to share? What could I possibly say to someone in that situation that could help them? I went anyway, and I went with that huge fear that I wouldn't be able to make a difference. And at the end of the week, we had the test. We had to run an event for 400 teachers over 2 days. I don't want to teach teachers. I don't want to teach people in Liberia. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a Liberian. I haven't suffered from war or whatever. And Kimmy gave me some advice. He said, David, it's very simple. Tell your story. Tell your story. Because they think they're the only ones with stories. And they're frightened to tell them. Especially the men. They're afraid to tell their story. If you tell your story, maybe that's what makes a difference. So I'd like to tell you my story. This is us. This is my story. What I don't want you to know about me, what I don't want you to know about me, is that my father's Chinese. In 1961, I know it's hard to believe, in 1961 I was born. I was born here. My mother was 16 years old. She was a shop girl. This was a home for fallen women. What that meant was that young girls who were pregnant were brought in and they worked as domestics. And they slept on the floor of the attic. It was needed. I was born in February. Because the people who ran Hope Deep, as the girls called it, hopeless, thought it was wrong to have children out of wedlock. They would trick the girls into signing documents to give them permission for their babies to be taken away. And they would be signed before the children were born, because they knew it was so much harder to get a signature after the child was born. And yet even then, it was illegal to do that. And it would happen. And they would sign a piece of paper. And then the baby would be born. And the baby would be taken away. There are stories of girls, 16, 17, 18 years old, being locked in cupboards so they wouldn't cause a problem that babies were being taken away. I was incredibly lucky. My mother was allowed to be with me for 2 weeks. And then I was taken away. And I went to Bernardo's. And I stayed there for 11 months. And I was very lucky to be adopted by a family that chose me. And I grew up in North Northumberland, which is even further north than Yorkshire. That was interesting growing up there. In my school, in my town, in my bit of Northumberland, I was the only person who wasn't white. And I couldn't understand that, because I thought I was white. Because I looked around me, everybody else was white. I was a white family. How can I not be white? And then I discovered, oh, I'm not actually from this family, I'm adopted. But that's okay, I can kind of understand that. And then I started to get bullied. 7 or 8 years old, children become aware of difference. And the reality is, I'm a kid. You're fat, you're thin, you're tall, you're short, you're specky, you're not specky, you're freckly, you're not freckly. All sorts of stuff. You've got a pointy nose, you haven't. That's what kids do. But with me, I was genius. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to ask, because I was the only one. And I remember living with this for about, I don't know, felt like a lifetime. Maybe it was 6 weeks, maybe it was 6 months, maybe it was 3 months, I don't know. And I sat down at the dinner table with my family, I must have been about 8. And I said, I'm really unhappy. Why is that? Well, it's called me cheeky at school. I know what that means. And they all started laughing. Sticks and stones may break my bones, names never hurt me. I made a decision in that moment. In that moment, I made a decision with every cell of my body that I would never ask for help again. I would never ask for help again. And I grew up. I was fiercely independent. When I left home at 18, when I could be, my mother said to me, the problem with you, David, is you never ask for anything. I did once, didn't work out well. But then it kind of got a bit weird. Because my parents who adopted me told me that my mother was a doctor and that my father was a medical student from Malaysia. Sound like pretty cool parents to me. And when my adopted parents died, I did some research because I found out some information from the papers. And I discovered that my mother was a 16-year-old child girl. I didn't want to know that. That's not me. So I waited 5 years, knowing that, until I sent her a letter. She lives 40 miles from where I live. She wrote back to me. She was ashamed. She thought that I would hate her. And my intention of contacting her was just to tell her, I love you. You had a choice, and your choice was to have. And we exchanged some letters, and she wrote me a letter that said, you might want to know about your father. And my father, it turns out, was a waiter in a Chinese restaurant in Middlesbrough. He was 40. Married, 3 children. Back in Hong Kong. She doesn't even know his name, because the name that she had was his English waiter name. And as soon as he found out that she was pregnant, and his boss found out, he was sent back to Hong Kong. She never heard from him again. So it's very weird having 3 fathers in your life in 3 months. And very recently, something very powerful happened to me. I was telling my story because I always thought that maybe finding my mother would be a powerful thing for me. I was so grateful I was able to tell her that I loved her. Someone asked me a question. They said to me, David, Have you ever grieved for your father? Have you ever grieved for your father? I never had a relationship with my father. I didn't know what father meant. My adopted father worked 16 hours a day. I have no recollection of him ever holding me, telling me he loved me, playing with me. I don't know who he was. The male father was made up. My real father was probably dead. And that question changed my life. Because by thinking of grieving, which I did, it presupposed a relationship, it presupposed love, it presupposed everything about the relationship with my father. And I created a ritual. If you don't know where this is Bamber Castle, very close to where I grew up. In a few days after being asked this question, I travelled to Bamber to say farewell. I found out what the symbol was for dad. In Cantonese, not father, not daddy, dad. That's what he was to me. And I got a white lily and a white orchid. And when the time was out, in December last year, I went to the beach. The Northumberland beach in the middle of nowhere, in December. It was full of people. Get off my beach, this is my moment. This is my beach. And I waited. And they went. And I walked down to the water's edge. And I placed my gift. And I waited for the tide to come and carry it away. And stood for an hour in the sleet and the rain. And I said farewell. And I drove back to York. And then I presume that one or two of you might have driven up north via the A1. And as you drive up, at least to me, there is this most magnificent thing. I know what everybody's takes. You get near Newcastle, and the angel of the Lord is standing there. And so many times I've said, I'm going to visit you. And I didn't. It was sunset. There was nobody there. Of course not, it was raining and snowing. Be waiting for me. And then I came home. I shared this story with 400 teachers. What happened next, I was not prepared for. Three men approached me, 3 young men. They said, David, the story was amazing, so powerful. I have a question for you. I'd like to ask you to be my spiritual father. Nothing prepares you for that. And whether it mean to anything going forward? I don't know, but it meant something powerful in that moment. I think one of them wanted money from me. And I shared that with Rich. He said, well, of course. What do we want from fathers? We want safety and comfort. We want money. Of course he wants money from you. So what's your secret story? What is your secret story? What will set you free?